Hello, School Transportation Nation. It's Tony Corpin. We want to welcome you back to the podcast. Always want to welcome also Mr. Ryan Gray, my co-host. Ryan, great to see you, my friend.
Tony, great to see you. Nation, great to be heard.
Excellent. Well, hey, this episode is brought to you by TransFinder, the leader in school bus routing software, by School Radio, your source for reliable radio communications. Just a little bit, we'll be speaking with Michele Gay, educator, co-founder of Safe and Sound Schools, and the Transporting Students with Disabilities Conference keynote speaker. Ryan, I know you lined up Michele, and we're excited to hear from her down in Frisco, Texas in November 6th to the 11th. We got a great lineup of speakers, and she's one of them.
Absolutely. It's great to meet her in person after working with her staff for many months to put this together. So she's just got a great story, tragic story. Out of that tragedy, of course, her daughter, Josephine, was one of 20 killed at Sandy Hook in 2012. And that led to Michele co-founding Safe and Sound Schools. And Michelle's a former educator, former special education teacher. Josephine had autism. So there's a connection there, obviously, from safety and crisis prevention standpoint for students with disabilities. So she's got some great perspective to share. And then she's going to be bringing that, of course, in full tilt to TSD.
Yeah, active shooter situations like Sandy Hook, Uvalde, right? There's so many kind of that have happened over the years, and they're just so shocking to the country when they happen. And obviously to happen as a special needs child, this is, again, what a traumatic experience and for the families, for the communities. And, it's just being prepared, right, Ryan? Emergency preparedness is always something that is kind of an afterthought in some degree because everybody hopes for the best, but you got to plan for the worst in case something like this arrives.
And as we're recording this, we had another school shooting today up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at a Catholic school. 2 dead there and 17 injured last we saw reported. So as Michele and I talk, it's only getting worse. And when you're dealing with students with disabilities and different medical conditions, fragility, it just really ups the ante in the game. And she talks a little bit about that horrific day and the worst nightmare of any parent, right? But some real good has come from it. And she talks about the need to include transportation. She talks about the extension of the classroom, that what's happening at the school building in the classroom needs to be happening on the bus and vice versa. She alludes to the funding issues that transportation has and sometimes being lower priority, anywhere from 5 to 10% of a school budget. Not a lot when you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, even tens of millions of dollars for maybe a smaller district. So then you look at LA Unified, it's in the billions, New York City, billions. So it's really a necessary conversation to continue to have in terms of training and in terms of empathy and sensitivity and just really arming both the students as well as staff with the tools they need to address a situation. Because as she mentions, she never in her wildest dreams thought that what happened to her family would happen. And none of us do. But just like the families affected by the tragedy in Minneapolis and countless of others, too many to mention, it happens. And if it can happen there, it can happen anywhere. And that's what we have to prepare for.
Yeah, it'll be a great session, Ryan, and I'm excited for our attendees to get in there. Don't forget, guys, you can sign up, lock in our early bird rate for the TSD conference, save $100 on your registration, November 6th to the 11th down in Frisco, Texas, suburb of Dallas. So we'd love to see you down there this fall for some great sessions. Go to tsdconference.com. You can check out the agenda, look at all the great sessions and networking events, all the fun things we have planned and educational hands-on training. I know there's a story on stnonline.com highlighting our special trainings and hands-on experiences. Ryan, you want to dive a little deeper on that for our audience?
Absolutely. So TSD conference more than any other conference, really known for the hands-on elements. So we, of course, have the 8-hour Child Passenger Safety on School Buses seminar sponsored by NHTSA that will be launching things off on Friday, November 7th. Then we have 2 wheelchair securement opportunities. AMF Bruins hosts one in the morning on Friday. Q-Strength Sherlock, which sponsors our rodeo, thanks to them. They have a securement training that is open for everybody, but really addresses some of the needs that the competitors in the rodeo are going to have. Then we have, of course, the rodeo the following day. So I think we're going to have another story coming up on that that really gets into the specifics. We're getting all the test information, all the pamphlets up on tsdconference.com. So you can head over there if you're interested in the rodeo. Come one, come all. A lot of states have rodeo competitions that qualify teams to participate in rodeos like at TSD Conference, but certainly will accept anybody and everyone that wants to come and do better, wants to come and test themselves, wants to see how they stack up against others from across the nation. You can come as a single entrant and you'll be paired with somebody else. Certainly you can form a team. And it's interesting, Tony, every year we do meet school bus drivers and attendants who work together on a route at a district. Sometimes we find folks that they used to be a driver, but they're the driver trainer. I think in the past, we've actually had someone who was also a mechanic who also drove the school bus. So they come in and they partner up and they have a great time as well. So that's a must do activity out at TSD. We also have the return of our evacuating students with special needs and preschoolers. That's a full day hands-on activity. We're smoking a couple of buses. We have a practice bus, a test bus. We have quote unquote students on board that you need to identify and evacuate in a certain amount of time. There is a fire extinguisher station. There's belt cutting. It's just a lot of hands-on opportunities for folks.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that, Ryan. I know the attendees get right into it. They love touching and feeling and getting that training. It's very visceral. I mean, when you're in the field, you're dealing with this all day long, right? In a classroom, it's a little different. The conditions are a little different, but you're dealing with the best technology. You're getting the latest and greatest tech just to see, like, hey, comparatively, what am I working with versus what's the newest, latest, and greatest technology from guys like AMF Bruns, like Q-Strength. So you can really see, and I know I've been through the wheelchair securement training that Q-Strength puts on, and it's tough. Different wheelchairs are different with that WC19. Where do you latch on the tie down to? Where are the correct points? There are more difficult chairs than others. And you have to just kind of MacGyver it a little bit if you really want to restrain that wheelchair properly to make sure in case of an accident that there isn't an incident, right? And I think it's proper use of those tie downs because in the moment, you never know what can happen, right? Like 99 out of 100 times, there's not going to be an accident, but it's that one time that you're not trained or you didn't do it right, that an accident occurs and there could be injuries or even greater fatalities, and that equals a lawsuit or something else. So getting this hands-on training is so important. I feel like we take it for granted that, this is just a mundane activity that happens day in and day out, but you really can't make mistakes.
Absolutely. And I think the whole point is not to have people MacGyver it. And, we've heard horror stories of folks using bungee cords or different things, whether it be for a wheelchair or different things for child safety restraints. And so this is a must for anyone who's working with students with disabilities on board the bus, whether you're the driver or the attendant, and you want to make sure that you're securing these students properly, whether they be in a wheelchair or if you're transferring them from the wheelchair to a seat. You do that at all times possible if the student's condition can allow for that. But how do you do that safely? And again, with the evacuation. So lots of great opportunities at TSD Conference. And again, if you're dealing with kids on the school bus and they have they have disabilities or they're preschoolers. Sign up for tsdconference.com.
All right, Ryan, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. We're back from STN Expo West, and what a blast. The TransFinder team had meeting everybody. They held several classes, had an amazing response to their ride and drive, showcasing their award-winning driver app, Wayfinder. One of the highlights was the top transportation teams panel discussion. The leaders of the 6 winning teams demonstrated just why their teams won. These were thoughtful leaders who listened to their teams, made changes to show how they cared, and yes, even had to make difficult decisions. As TransFinder's CEO Antonio Civitella said, it is so rewarding to honor these men and women who truly do heroic work every day. You can see how much this recognition means to these teams, and that's what makes it all worth the effort. TransFinder started the Top Transportation Teams program in 2023, and it continues to get bigger and better every year. Learn more by visiting toptransportationteams.com to learn more about how your company can join the program. Also visit transfinder.com. All right, let's talk about some top headlines hitting the website. NAPT came out. We got some winners, winner, chicken dinner, right? We got announcements. Special congratulations to our friend Alex Robinson. And she's going in the Hall of Fame. I mean, she's definitely deserving of that, Ryan.
Absolutely. I was joking with her last week, and it's not really a joke, but I believe she might be the youngest entrant into the Hall of Fame, at least, not posthumously. There were, I know, a couple of NAPT inductees a couple decades ago. Dennis Essery comes to mind after being in a motorcycle crash. He might have been a little bit younger, but certainly Alex, the fountain of youth. She's been in the industry for over 30 years. Doesn't look like it, but she has such a wealth of knowledge. And speaking of TSD Conference, one of our esteemed tenured faculty members, and I believe she's been to every single TSD conference, but maybe for the first 1 or 2. And that goes back to her time when she was the exceptional student education coordinator, transportation coordinator for the Florida Department of Education. She was working for our good friend Charlie Hood, former NASDIP's executive director, former Florida State director, good friend of ours, also a TSD advisor to us. So congratulations to Alex. She's been the executive director for New York City, director of transportation for San Diego Unified down in Southern California, expert witness, extraordinaire consultant. So hats off to her. Congrats, Alex.
Yeah, and we also had, just on the heels of that, the next announcement came out. There were quite a few other awards that NAPT had tossed out as well. One of our friends, Denny Coughlin, also a trainer at the STN Expo and TSD conferences, is a winner as well. Ryan, you want to break down that list?
Yeah, absolutely. So Denny, congrats to him. I sent a text to him the other day. He is one of 2 recipients of the Distinguished Service Award. So that is one of the highest awards NAPT gives for folks who have gone above and beyond in service of the industry. So congratulations to Denny. He is former fleet manager. He's been retired for a couple decades now from Minneapolis Public Schools, but he is the owner of School Bus Training Company. And as you said, Tony, he helps us a lot with our conferences. He's going to be at TSD. He helps with the evacuation training that I was discussing earlier, that full day on Sunday, November 9th. So congratulations to Denny. He's joined with the Distinguished Service Award by Stephanie Walker. She's the Director of Transportation for Habersham County Schools in Georgia. Also a rising superstar in the annals of school transportation news magazine back in 2019. So it's great to see one of our rising superstars. Here we are, fast forward 6 years later, and she's winning a Distinguished Service Award. And certainly she was doing good work long before we recognized her. But she's also the vice president of the Georgia Association for Pupil Transportation. And she's been the director there at Habersham County since 2021. So would like to STN should take some credit for that, but I know that it's all Stephanie. So congratulations to Stephanie. And several other awards, Tony, Continuing Education Award. That's Thomas Built Bus sponsors that every year. Michelle Summers from Lamar Consolidated ISD in Texas. Congratulations to her. IC Bus, their Driver Training and Safety Award goes to Sherry Zulik from the Maine School Administrative District 6. She was also nominated as a Rising Superstar 2019, the same year that Stephanie Walker made the list. So congratulations to Sherry.
I'm sensing a pattern here, Ryan. I'm sensing a pattern, right?
I know. It's like I said, STN has its fingers on the pulse. The Special Needs Route Supervisor for Fayette County Schools in Georgia, Catherine Michael, is the winner of Q Straight and Sherlock Special Needs Transportation Awards. So we were mentioning Q Straight and Sherlock earlier for the wheelchair securement and, of course, the rodeo sponsorship down at TSD in a couple months. And last but not least, the Bluebird Heroism Award goes to Crystal Foster and Jocelyn Johnson, the school bus driver bus monitor team from Spartanburg District 6. I believe that's in South Carolina. They made news headlines earlier this year when they saved 3 children from a house fire that they saw when they were driving their route. So congratulations to that whole team. These awards are going to be given out in person at the NAPT ACTS out in Grand Rapids in the first weekend of November. So we'll get some more information, I'm sure, when that happens.
I know, Ryan, right before we started, we were talking about a new kind of study that WRI had put out on green energy, electric school buses. You want to share with the audience what that entails?
Sure. So this research from World Resources Institute, WRI, of course, they have their electric school bus initiative that puts out so much data on electric school buses. They partnered with Carleton University, and it's a first of its kind study, Tony, that looks at the societal benefits in dollar figures of electric school buses. So we've seen a lot out there about electric vehicles, but this data estimates $1.6 billion in societal benefits. So it's really looking at the improved health outcomes and reduced climate impacts, and looking at comparing diesel school buses and higher emitting pollutants, certainly, but diesel has gotten much cleaner. But still, this data indicates that compared to electric school buses are still coming out on top. And it's interesting, Tony, that the study also addresses the creation of electricity. So a lot of folks will talk about electricity generation and say, well, it's not as clean. It's not really zero emissions if you look at the entire life cycle. But this data claims that even with accounting for the emissions from that electricity generation, that electric school buses still come out, they of course have the lowest GHG footprint of any school bus. So some good data for school districts that have electric school buses or are looking to add school buses to share with their communities, their school districts. Certainly folks that are using diesel and still diesel reigns supreme. We saw a press release from the Propane Education Research Council that still indicates that about 87% of buses, or at least from in terms of what parents are seeing out there, are diesel. So, a lot of work is being done on electric school buses. Certainly, this data from WRI and Carleton University calls out New York, California, Florida, and Texas in particular for seeing the greatest advantages. Of course, New York and California have those mandates essentially for electric school buses, but we're seeing a lot of electric school buses going into Florida, especially South Florida. And then Texas is starting to grow as well. And those states, of course, that's where we're seeing a lot of them, the high numbers of school buses on roads when you're looking at the state fleet sizes. Some of the big winners there, especially New York and California and Texas. So, it's pretty interesting to look at both health benefits and financial benefits from this.
Yeah, I know, Ryan. We've discussed a lot about the advantage of clean energy school buses. And I know the argument too is diesel is cleaner than ever as well. So it's also just looking at the age of the fleet and the level of pollutants, because school buses are notorious for holding on to buses for 10 years, but there are other places that are 10, 12, 15, 20. Heck, I remember when South Carolina had buses that were 30 years old and they traded them for 25-year-old buses. Not exactly an emissions benefit there for 5 years, but yeah, that's a complicated situation. But I think the change in regulatory position by the government will definitely affect people's willingness to replace their fleets in a more expedited way. And I know you had talked to Charles Chilton from IC Bus last week, and you asked him point blank, do you think that this is going to affect a pre-buy? And he basically said, hey, that really is more of the trucking industry than the school bus industry. But I know we did see it some years ago when we had that changeover on engine tech.
2010, yeah.
And realistically, it's not unheard of that a district looks at the price of the bus, and if it costs $20,000 more with the new engine tech versus the old, I mean, pretty much people are going to look at that and say, hey, look, I'd rather save the 20 grand and go with the older tech. You know, if there's a fuel economy shift, that might be different. You could justify the expense if you could pencil that out. But if it's strictly environmental, I think that lies also with electric. You know, you have to look at the CapEx versus OpEx expenses. And we know electric, no parts. Really, you don't have maintenance, or very minimal at best. And there's a big savings there in terms of PM, labor. There's a shortage of maintenance professionals out there. Well, if they don't have to do as much on an electric school bus, there's some savings that might occur, or you can diversify your mix of your fleet, because not that many fleets are going to go 100% electric. There are a few outliers out there, but you definitely see the adoption of electric still happening. It's just, you know, the pacing of it. So we'll be curious to see how all these things shake out and how people look at their budgets heading into 25, 26, which we're already in the school year. Most budgets are already set for a lot of folks. So now it comes down to how are they buying? What are their strategic choices?
Absolutely. And amid all this, because the California Air Resources Board has been historically driving a lot of this, clean fuels, a decade or more ago, it was CNG. And most recently, of course, it's been electric. And when you see what's going on in DC again, we've talked so much about it. And of course, Congress earlier this year voting to revoke the most recent EPA waivers that were extended to CARB during the Biden administration that really allowed the advanced clean trucks rule to move forward. There's lawsuits going on and continue to go on. I know that President Trump signed that into law, but still see a lot of legal maneuvering going on behind the scenes. And last week as well, CARB issued a report basically in response to Governor Gavin Newsom's executive order N2725, which basically earlier this year in June directed CARB and several other state agencies to recommend strategies to make clean transportation more affordable, reliable, and accessible. So of course, we're looking really at zero emissions. And basically this California Air Resources Board report points out that there's still 17 other states in DC that have chosen to adopt at least part of California's vehicle standards. So while the federal government is trying to take some power away from California, there's still some existing regulations on the books that a lot of states are following. And we've seen some of the states push back, maybe extend deadlines for meeting some of these. But that's, I think, why we also see the OEMs, a group of them, and from the school bus standpoint, we see International, which is the IC Bus brand owner, and then Daimler Truck North America, which of course is Thomas Built Buses. They've joined a consortium of OEMs that are suing CARB as well. So this back and forth legal wrangling. But really, it's what we've been talking about is these fuels are out there, or they will be out there soon. When you're looking at like octane from Cummins, there is a lot of technology that has already been baked and out of the oven, ready to go in terms of GHG phase 3 from EPA. And we know that EPA is looking to amend that through rulemaking. We have the D rate issue that we've been talking about, and that's more for trucks. But there is an impact there in terms of SCR with diesel engines. So just still a lot going on out there. Folks have a lot of decisions to make, but still kind of standing pat with what I've heard from the OEMs that, hey, they have the solutions ready to go. A lot of this is noise. I think it's going to get figured out. Certainly, it's noise that has some dollar signs behind it, definitely. And that anytime you have that going on, that makes people squeamish. But for the here and now, I think that we have seen the purchasing cycle shift a little bit. Charles talked a little bit about that last week as well. We've been talking about that. It's not the traditional buying cycle, but all that said, it's still there's the options out there, and it's just a matter of really budgets right now, because so many states and school districts are hurting in terms of budgets. It's cyclical. The industry has dealt with this time and time again, but it certainly doesn't make things any easier on folks.
Yeah, those are great points, Ryan. I think environment, clean vehicle, obviously safety. Our hearts go out to the victims in Minnesota in this shooting. I mean, it's absolutely a tragedy, and nothing can prepare you for something like this, but you got to train. You got to train for these sorts of things. And I think it hits home once again that these active shooter events, they can happen at any time, at any place, Ryan. And it's just scary stuff. So definitely excited to hear your interview with Michele Gay right after this. Hey, safety is a number one priority for everyone in school transportation, and even more so when needing to communicate in a school bus setting. School radios, push to talk over cellular or POC radios, are the safety enhancement you need to provide clear communication across all aspects of your fleet. Schools, SROs, that's school resource officers, and beyond. School radio helps take safety and connectivity a step further by offering interoperability solutions that bridge conventional two-way radios with POC systems, creating a unified network that boosts effectiveness and safety. This integrated strategy guarantees smooth communication in both emergency situations and daily activities. To learn more about how school radio can improve safety in your communication methods, visit school-radio.com. That's school-radio.com.
All right, we're back. Thanks, Nation, and very honored to be joined as our special guest this week, Michele Gay, the Executive Director and co-founder of Safe and Sound Schools. Michele, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You are our opening TSD Conference keynote. You're going to be speaking in the afternoon on Friday, November 7th. And obviously, for those who don't know who you are or what Safe and Sound Schools is, very important organization. It's been around, I think it's 11 years now, or give or take 10 years.
Yeah, we're coming up, I think, on 13. Maybe?
Oh, 13.
I don't know. Yeah.
It's time. Yeah. Boy, it just.
Live, I know.
And, from a very serious note, it was born out of tragedy, personal, horrific tragedy that no parent ever can imagine, fathom, much less, want to have occur to them. Sandy Hook, the horrific school shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, December 14th, 2012, obviously a date that will be a permanent scar for you. Before we get into that and the founding of Safe and Sound Schools, let's talk about your beautiful daughter, Josephine Grace, Joey.
Yeah, let's start there.
She was one of the
Yeah.
one of the victims of that horrific incident. Tell us about Joey.
So I love starting with her. I feel like she's our center. She's our, how we stay grounded, right? In remembering her and keeping her alive in this work. But, she was typical in many ways, in that she was, she was a 7-year-old kid, in the mix with her first grade classmates. And, she was mischievous and she was girly and very affectionate, very loving and communicative in her own way. But she was also a child that we would, refer to as especially special. I have 3 girls and they are all very special. But Josephine was especially special in that she came into the world with lots of additional bells and whistles, lots of challenges and gifts that come along with an autism spectrum diagnosis. And, as part of that, there were visual impairment issues. There was apraxia of speech, global apraxia, which made kind of the gross motor movements inconsistent, and fine motor as well. So, she certainly had, her share of challenges in her short life with us, but man, she made the most of every minute of this life, and continues to inspire us every day.
And I've seen you do interviews and speak before, and you mentioned that despite her apraxia, her autism, she was nonverbal, that she just had a way of bringing folks together and just work in the room, just a special little girl.
No one's ever said it quite that way, but that's exactly what it was. She just was very magnetic in terms of how she related with people. Her classmates were very attracted to her and interested in, what was going on in that little head. They were so tenacious in terms of how to communicate with her. They were, inquisitive and just warm and so caring for her. She was just really blessed with the classmates that she had and the teachers that she had at Sandy Hook.
And your personal background, you were a teacher.
I sure was.
You still are a teacher. I think you can still say that.
Yeah.
In your line of work now.
Can't get away from it.
No matter how hard you try, no.
Right.
But, and I asked you about this, and you actually taught students with disabilities.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So how did that career or that background, that training help you and your husband when Joey came along and you first noticed you have 2 other daughters that are older than Joey?
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right.
If you can explain from a parent's perspective, but also from an educator's perspective, when you first noticed that Joey was unique.
Yeah. I would say I started teaching at 21. And before that, I worked in early education, preschools, obviously the whole, practicum experience in my undergrad and all of that. So I sort of feel like my adult lens is that of a teacher. It just kind of formed that way because that was the direction I was heading in. And then I became a mom, and I had this, additional set of lenses, this perspective that I didn't have as a teacher. And together, those 2 perspectives were instrumental, really, in providing for Josephine and helping her navigate the world. It was a tremendous gift to have that background as an early and elementary educator, as well as a special educator. I worked in a general education setting, and Joey went to, a general education setting. That means basically a typical public school. But the thing about a typical public school is that in our country, it serves everybody. We welcome everybody, and we're committed to educating and growing everybody. And so there are a lot of students in the mix that have a variety of different gifts and challenges. And I was very accustomed to those, had a lot of experience with other students with autism, with medical fragility, with sensory disorders, with all kinds of, different gifts and challenges, students with Down syndrome. And every one of those amazing students that I got to work with ended up contributing greatly to how we would navigate life with Josephine. I mean, they were gifts in the time that I got to be with them as a teacher. But those gifts just literally kept giving as I became the mom of a child with so many similar or identical in some cases needs.
And in terms of the safety, and I know that I've seen, again, some talks that you've done, and if we go to December 14th, 2012, that morning you discussed that safety was on your mind, as it is any parent, kind of, but in the back of your mind, you're getting your kids ready to school. And I believe they did not ride the school bus, correct? Or did they?
Actually, all my girls did, because it was all about the bus. I mean, it's still to this day is all about the bus.
Okay.
Especially as an elementary schooler. No, they all rode the bus. That day, my oldest rode the bus to the intermediate school. She was newly a fifth grader there, so that was exciting for her. It was the big bus, and then my then fourth grader also took the big bus, but to Sandy Hook School. Those are fourth graders are the oldest kids in our elementaries in Newtown. So especially exciting for her because fourth graders get to sit in the back of the bus. And that is, as you may remember, that is the place to be. That's where all the excitement is. And then Josephine had her own transportation as part of her IEP. Her individual education plan, she would have a special bus, a smaller bus that would come and pick her and some of her peers up. She was picked up routinely at the end of our driveway, and there was an aide on the bus, like a lot of schools do for this kind of specialized transportation service. And it was one of her favorite places to be. And our driver and our aide, both grandparents, from the community. So really special people in her life as well. That day, she did not ride the bus. I had actually chosen to hold on to her a little bit longer that morning, and I did cancel her bus pickup, and I drove her in a little bit late that day. So that may be what you're remembering there. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that special, those extra minutes, and certainly when you guys got the phone call and this automated phone call and everything that went through your mind at that point, I think a lot of people know what happened at Sandy Hook. I don't want to get into the details too much, but I think what's really important is in the moment, obviously dealing with that tragedy, that unspeakable tragedy, your life gets shattered. How did that experience lead to Safe and Sound Schools? Because you partnered with Alyssa Parker, who also lost her daughter, Emily,
That's right,
in that shooting. And they were in the same class, Emily and Joey?
They were fast friends, those two, both very, very girly girls. They were interested in a lot of the same books and Barbies and Fancy Nancy and, all those things.
When did it must have taken some time. Obviously, I'm sure you're still processing this here, almost 13 years later. But how quickly did the idea come to you and Alyssa that we need to do something?
Strangely, very, very quickly for me. And I would say for Alyssa too, we were very like-minded, and we had a lot of the same, I think, needs and almost this like compulsion to get to work. I think some people can relate after something horrible happens in your life. There's this moment of kind of you're like adrenalized, and you're very driven. That does subside at a point, and there's a crash in there as well. But the two of us were really very activated. I think we felt like we needed to hold our families together, and in doing so, we kind of held each other together. So it's a tremendous gift that the two girls kind of left us each other to try to navigate this completely different world. That's the only way I would describe it. You talked about it. Your world is shattered. And it is, but it's just like life is not recognizable. I'm sure folks listening with different experiences may have an experience like that where everything you planned for, everything you were moving toward, everything you hoped and dreamed of is gone. It's gone. And yet you are still here and you have responsibilities. And the two of us were just both similarly driven to get to the bottom of this. I think for our own healing, we needed to understand how in the world this could happen anywhere in the world, much less in our sweet little town, where everybody knew everybody and test scores were high and, the beautiful, beautiful community. So very much, I think in the beginning, the two of us were just kind of hanging on to each other and having a lot of difficult conversations that for whatever reason we could only have with each other. And that kind of led us to this point. But I remember sitting that day, waiting for news and waiting for my husband to arrive from work to be with me. And I just couldn't believe, as a teacher, as hard as we all work to keep our students safe, and as many years as we were, past Columbine, that here I am in my town, in my car, at my elementary school parking lot, and we are in the same place, essentially. Like this is happening. And it was just kind of a knowing that you're going to be working on this. This can't be, we have to fix this.
And sadly, as we're recording this, there was another school shooting in Minneapolis, the Ascension Catholic School. Our thoughts and prayers go out to them. 2 children killed so far, from what reports are saying, at least 17 injured. To your point, unfathomable that it could happen when it happened for you personally, but then that we've seen this huge spike just in the last several years where it was already going on this trajectory, and it's just, pardon the word, but exploded.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like the way that it felt and continues to feel is like the sort of the line in the sand just keeps getting moved back. Right. And so, it was horrific enough to think of these things happening in a high school like Columbine when I was a bright, shiny new teacher. And then for these things to be happening in middle schools and elementary schools and at opening mass at a Catholic school, starting the new school year. It is, it's heartbreaking, and I'll be honest with you, it's defeating. When you have a moment like this, you're working so hard to support so many wonderful people doing such great work in their community, and yet we're still living in this world, right? And it's very clear that our work is nowhere near done.
In terms of preparedness, training, crisis prevention, crisis response, so much of the narrative, and I'm sure a lot of what Safe and Sound Schools does, is focused on the classroom, in the building, and that's obviously vital. For our audience, obviously transporting students. So we have that extension of the classroom, the school bus, or we're seeing other vehicles now, which makes things even more challenging.
Sure does.
So I'm wondering, from your perspective as an educator, as someone who's been affected by these tragedies, what are the lessons learned for transportation in terms of keeping the kids safe, keeping their staff safe, especially when you're looking at the most vulnerable, students with disabilities and different medical conditions?
So I think what we have to consider as we do this work is, what are the things that we do have control over? We might not have control over someone having a mental breakdown who also has a grievance that has followed the pathway to violence, that has, created a plan, all of those things. That's another body of work within school safety. And we need to continue to do that work and that prevention emphasis. But we really have to be setting our little people, our vulnerable people, our staff members up for success in safety in all of these places. So when you think about the school bus, it's really no different than the classroom in terms of the fact that we've got a lot of really important people in that rolling classroom, essentially, right? There's one adult, and that adult is focused on transporting everyone safely, right? In my picture perfect world, there is also another adult who could be focused on managing behaviors on the bus. We have, not just the threat of physical violence and that kind of constant worry, I guess, in the back of our heads with acts of violence like we're hearing about on the news today. But, bullying incidents, kids getting rough with each other on the bus, any number of things they're not supposed to have on the bus, right? So there's a tremendous amount of need, I think, to focus on the school bus in terms of how we keep our kids physically safe and psychologically safe. And that means outside, thinking about how do we keep people who shouldn't be able to get on the bus with our students out, and how do we keep that environment, it is an environment on the bus, a safe environment for everyone, both physically and psychologically. And I think a lot of communities are taking this charge seriously. They're realizing the school bus is an extension of the school, and we are responsible for our precious people from door to door. We have to be focusing on how we're doing this work on the school bus. So it is encouraging to see these conversations happening, to see transportation folks involved in the broader school safety conversations as well now. But we have to be looking at it almost like we do our portable classrooms, those mobile classrooms, trailers, cottages, whatever they call them in your neck of the woods. The bus is no different. It's got really important people on it. It's very clear and obvious to somebody who might do harm that this is a school bus with school children on it. And any impact on that school bus is going to be a profound impact on the community, on parents, on families and children. And unfortunately, that's a thing. That's a goal that we are seeing, a pattern of behavior that we're seeing that we have to defend against, we have to protect.
And in terms of the keynote that you're providing for us on November 7th, TSD Conference in Frisco, Texas, we're touching on your story here, and I never like to steal too much thunder. I want you to wow people, and I think they absolutely will be. But wondering if there's some takeaways that you're already thinking about that student transporters of students with disabilities, of preschoolers, pre-K, infant and toddler, can start to think about from the perspective of what you're going to be talking about, linking the classroom to the transportation and trying to provide the utmost safety and training to these kiddos.
Well, you said the key word, and that's training. So I think we're seeing more and more our transportation directors, our facilities directors, and our bus drivers and paras that are on some of those buses. They're hungry for this training because they know that could be the difference between, getting kiddos safely to school or experiencing an incident. I mean, just the fact that we're transporting kids is a big deal in the first place. So just trying to keep everybody safe in a large moving vehicle is a huge responsibility, but it goes so much further beyond that, right? We do have these external threats in communities. We have incidences where there will be a parent at the bus stop, who is who's upset, who might try to get on that bus, somebody who has a plan to harm and knows where that bus pickup is, right? We have non-custodial parents, lots of things to consider in terms of those external threats. But a lot of our bus drivers, our transportation directors and facilities folks they're focused on, we got to think about the inside of the bus as well. How are we training those folks, aides if we have them on the bus, and drivers themselves to be able to handle some of these situations? Because in a moment where something's happening, we really don't want that bus driver to have to think their way through, how am I going to handle this? They need to know that ahead of time. And it really does come down to training. So just like we're doing with our classroom teachers, our administrators, all of the staff that are in the school building, that are on the campus, that has to go to this, to this other school environment, which is the school bus. So there's a lot to think about. And the beauty is that a lot of that knowledge that we've been building and working on schools and campuses is transferable to the school bus environment. So it's exciting in that way. There's a lot of, I think, low-hanging fruit that we can gather to just really get that kind of training and that confidence, essentially, for our parents, our students, and those who are responsible for transporting our students.
And you mentioned you'd love to see another adult on every school bus. And recently, the National Congress on School Transportation, which is kind of the governing body that sets a lot of standards, recommendations that many states adopt, but they're now advocating for an attendant on any quote unquote special needs route. And I don't like to refer to it that way, but regardless if students are on board that require that aid on their IEP or not. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but as we discussed earlier with what happened today and just in general in our society, a lot to still work on.
We do. We have a lot to work on. But I think, and it's no small ask getting an attendant, an aide, a para on the buses for our students with special needs. That's been a long-standing standard, if you will, best practice. But even on the buses with our neurotypical students, our general population, that's really the direction we want to see. We want to have support for the bus driver. We want the bus driver to be able to focus on safe transportation, traffic. My gosh, I think about what it was like to have my kids and their friends all packed into my SUV all the time. It's a lot, it's a lot to just be the driver. But on top of it, it really is an environment. And some of our students are on that bus for quite some time, every morning and every afternoon. So, how are we really maximizing the opportunity to not only just keep our students safe physically and psychologically, but there are opportunities for healthy growth and socialization on the bus. Like I said, that for my kiddos in their elementary school years in particular was like the place to be. That's where you want to be, on the bus. So let's take advantage of that.
And I certainly, with your advocacy funding and advocating, pushing, lobbying for that funding, because we know that transportation can be anywhere from, I've seen it as low as 2% to maybe 10, maybe in a really lucky school district, 15% of the overall budget. How do schools make that decision and weigh that? Because again, everything is so important to get into the classroom. We always talk about the books and the kids and the teachers, but that transportation element, that's the kicker.
Such a good question. It does come down to funding, but I think it really comes down to educating our taxpayers, right? Because they're the ones who are going to have to help and pick up that tab. But why is this important? Why is it so critically important that we think about an intervention such as having an attendant on every single school bus? Well, let's look at what's happening. We have parents, we have students that are opting out of the school bus and they're driving their kids in, right? They're opting out of that. And why is that? Is that because of bullying issues? Is that because it's inconvenient? Let's get to the root of that. But in many cases, we're finding that it's because kids don't feel safe on the bus or they don't feel comfortable on the bus. And so what's happening is we've got now long lines, drop-off lines at schools. We've got increased traffic accidents. We've got increased parking lot incidents. It's one of the most risky places, honestly, where students are most at risk of being injured is that whole drop-off time with the buses and the cars. And the more cars that we have coming in and out of that mix, the more dangerous it is, right? So really painting a picture of why the ideal is actually to have our kids on the buses, why that is really the safest place for them to be. And if for some reason there's a perception or even a reality that buses are not a safe place to be, perhaps because of bullying, a lot of our parents and students are opting out of the school bus because of that, we can solve that problem, right? And that can be less expensive, less costly in terms of our human resources even, by just addressing the problem a little bit differently and being creative, because there is a real cost to kids not using the school bus, to parents driving their kids in, to a lot of the unintended consequences that we're seeing in those parking lots and those car loops and that mix every morning and every afternoon.
Well, Michele, you mentioned painting a picture. You're going to paint a beautiful picture, all in Joey's memory and the other 20 victims of Sandy Hook. So really looking forward to meeting you in person in November. I think it's only 2.5 months away, or give or take. It's crazy. So we're going to see each other soon.
Yeah.
November 7th, again, Michele Gay, co-founder and executive director of Safe and Sound Schools. And the keynote is brought to you by our friends at Bike Curve. So they're sponsoring this very important discussion. Michele, thanks so much for sharing your time with us, talking more about Joey, about Safe and Sound Schools, and the tie-in with transporting students with disabilities.
Thanks so much for having me. Can't wait to see you guys in November.
A special thanks to Michele and Ryan for jumping on this episode of the STN podcast. We also appreciate our sponsors, TransFinder and School Radio. Guys, don't forget to visit stnonline.com for all the latest news and analysis on the school transportation industry. Don't forget to lock in that early bird special for the TSD Conference, tsdconference.com to save $100. Go check out our agenda, jam-packed schedule of training sessions, hands-on experiences, networking events, trade show. There's so much we have to offer you guys down in Dallas, Frisco, Texas, November 6th through the 11th. Go check that out again, tsdconference.com. Guys, don't forget, subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to Pods Nation. We'll see you each and every week. We love you. We'll talk to you later.